What's up guys, Vital Syntax here, and this is going to be my review for Sniper Ghost Warrior 2. I'm playing on the PC platform and I've finished the single player campaign as well as played some multiplayer matches. And I'm going to split this review up into two main parts. So let's first talk about the single player. The first thing I want to address in regards to the campaign is the storyline. And you can tell just from the title of this game, Sniper Ghost Warrior 2, that the storyline is going to be very military generic, just either one, saving the president, or two, preventing a detonation of a nuclear bomb. And without getting into spoilers or what the storyline really is about or what happens in it, I'll just say that it was very boring, it was very generic, it was very expected, and I didn't really care about what was going on. It didn't really intrigue me at all, and it was more just a backdrop to the gameplay, which I guess is something that I did like a bit, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Next thing I want to address is the characters in the game. So you run into a couple different characters, you have a couple different partners, but there's really no background story to these characters. The voice acting, I will say, is done fairly decent, better especially compared to Sniper Ghost Warrior 1, which I also played on the PC a while back. But just like the storyline, it was very generic characters. You know, I didn't really care about what's going on, and I didn't really care about the characters themselves. There wasn't really much emotion in them, and they just felt kind of hollow. Now moving on to the gameplay, which really was the only part of this game, at least the single player component, that I really liked. And it wasn't something that, you know, I loved, but I will say I liked it to some extent. But the first thing I wanted to address is some of the things I didn't like about the gameplay, and that's that it was extremely linear. I mean, it's go to this point, lay down, shoot these guys in the heads, move. Go to this spot, lay down, shoot these guys in the heads, move. Go to this spot, you get the idea. It was very repetitive and extremely linear. There's no openness to the map. You can't go multiple directions. There's really no choices to be made other than, I guess, who you shoot first. So overall, the gameplay, as far as being linear and repetitive, that was kind of a letdown. But at the same time, there was also some very satisfying points where I like shooting people in the head. I enjoy being a sniper in other first-person shooters, and that's what this game's all about. It gives you a chance to just be a sniper and don't have to worry about anything else. There's ballistics in the game. There's also, like, for example, bullet drop, wind speed, distance, and all that stuff that you have to take into account while taking your shot. I will say that if you're playing on the normal or easy difficulty, then you kind of get this circle that shows you where your bullet's going to land, so it makes it very, very easy to do long-range shots without really even having to pay attention to the wind speed or the distance. But if you do play on the harder difficulty, that isn't there. And although I didn't play the entire game on the harder difficulty, I started out on the harder difficulty. I would recommend people play it on the harder difficulty if you at least want to have a more enjoyable experience, just because it makes the whole sniper experience a little bit better, and it'll make the game last longer because you kind of have to take more time on your shots because the game really isn't that long of a campaign. There was also very limited weapons. I mean, there was like 3 or 4 sniper rifles in the game and like 1 pistol, and that was it. That's all you got to use. Sure, the enemies had assault rifles and other types of weapons, but you didn't get to use them. I mean, I guess since it's a sniper game, they don't want you using anything other than snipers, but it would have been nice to have maybe options for what sniper rifle you wanted to use and what attachments you wanted to use on it, or what secondary weapon you wanted to use. It was extremely, extremely limited, both in the single player and in the multiplayer, which I'll get into in a second. So the last thing I want to talk about in regards to the single player was the graphics. This game runs on CryEngine 3. Which is the same game that powers Crysis 3, but it's in no way, shape, or form comparable to Crysis 3's graphics. This game does not look anywhere as good as Crysis 3. Everything from the textures, there's a lot of low-res textures, there's a lot of low poly count objects, or low polygon count objects, that's what I'm trying to say. For example, there's some logs that were literally like four-sided logs. There's just essentially a square. But there were some nice post-processing effects. There was some decent lighting here and there. And overall, if you compare it to something like Call of Duty or any other like generic first-person shooter, I would say it's in the good-looking games or good-looking graphic category. I mean, it's not going to be comparing to, you know, Crysis or Battlefield or some of those, you know, high-fidelity graphic games. But it does look somewhat decent, and that's once again thanks to the CryEngine 3 I've heard this runs fairly well on consoles. For me, at the highest ultra settings on a GTX 680, if you want to list all the components that are in my PC, you can check out this sidebar on my channel. It ran about anywhere between 70 and 90 frames per second, so that's a very reasonable frame rate for how the game looked. And once again, that's probably thanks mostly to CryEngine 3. So moving on to the multiplayer, it's honestly pretty bad, and it's borderline terrible or borderline the worst I've ever played in the past couple years. To put it into kind of a summary as far as what content you're getting, there is one game mode, which is Team Deathmatch. There is 2 maps. There are like 4 guns, the same sniper rifles and pistol that you had in the single player. There's no voice over IP on the PC. I don't know about the consoles. There's no quick server, quick match type of finding system. They do have a server browser, but it's extremely basic. It shows you what map they're playing, what game mode, which is Team Deathmatch every time, and how many people are in the server. They don't give you a ping. They don't give you a location of that server. Nothing. There's no dedicated servers, obviously, so whoever is hosting a server is hosting that off of their machine, so it doesn't run very well, and there's lots of latency issues. There's no host migration system, so if the host of that match leaves the server, everybody just loses and it just ends, and that's it. There's no progression, like there's no leveling system, there's no unlock system where you might unlock snipers and attachments and things like that. And the worst part is there was very, very few servers. Now, I played this the night of release and most of the day that it was released. So that might change as the game maybe is a week or 2 weeks older. But when I was playing, there was anywhere between 0 servers and 4 servers. And in those servers, there was between 1 and 4 players. I played about 4 matches of multiplayer, and I probably got 2 kills and died 2 times in the course of 50 minutes of gameplay. So the worst part of the multiplayer is that it's extremely boring. Now the servers can support up to, I believe, 12, maybe I think it's either 12 or 16, but let's just say 12 players in a server. Now if you had 12 players, 6 versus 6, it might be a little bit more fast-paced, it might be a little more enjoyable. But even then, I mean, it's the same way that the issue that I had with the original Sniper Ghost Warrior. The multiplayer is extremely dull. It's extremely bad. It's lacking content. It's lacking features that are expected from any game that's remotely finished, and it lacks some form of enjoyability because this game was absolutely pitiful. So if I had to give this game a rating, I'll probably try and separate the multiplayer and single player into their own categories just because of how bad the multiplayer was. So out of 10, I'd probably give the multiplayer a 1, maybe a 2, just because of its lack of content, its lack of features, like I said earlier. And then if I was to rate the single player campaign, I'd probably give it between a 5 and 6. There's a lot of issues with the storyline that it just wasn't enjoyable. The characters weren't enjoyable. It wasn't long enough. The only redeeming qualities I think about it were the gameplay of shooting the sniper rifles, getting headshots. That was enjoyable, and even though it was extremely repetitive and it was really the only part of this game that I enjoyed, it was fun. And then also the graphics, and although they're not amazing graphics, they're decent, and they at least are on par with or above most shooters nowadays. Definitely not up there with something like Crysis, even though it runs on the same game engine, or Battlefield or anything along those lines. Like I said earlier, lots of low resolution textures, low poly count objects. That might just be because they designed it maybe for a console to run better on consoles, but I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of my review for Sniper Ghost Warrior 2. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Overall, I probably wouldn't recommend buying this game unless you have extra $30. I'm glad that it's only $30. If it was $60, then I would never recommend it. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.